Our Across the Aisle segment tonight. Well, Donald J. Trump officially won the Electoral College vote yesterday after electors across the nation met to cast their ballots. The final vote tally was 304 electoral votes for Trump, 227 for Hillary Clinton, 3 for former Secretary of State Colin Powell, 1 for Bernie Sanders, 1 for Ron Paul, 1 for Ohio Governor John Kasich, and 1 for environmental activist Faith Spotted Eagle. The ironic part is that after all the hyped up nonsense about Republican electors defecting from Trump, only 2 actually defected, but 8 Democratic electors tried to defect from Hillary. 5 of them were successful. Joining me now to break it down, attorney and Democratic strategist Jan Ronis. Jan, good to see you.
Oh, good evening, thank you.
All right, Jan, the third time is the charm here. This is the third time we've seen Trump win. We saw him win on November 8th. We saw him win after Jill Stein's recounts. Now he won the Electoral College vote officially. It's over now. He won officially. Are liberals going to stop with the attacks on the Electoral College?
Well, it was over on November the 8th. So, you know, you broke it down pretty well. I think the attacks on the Electoral College will probably resurface again next time that there's a disparity between the popular vote and the Electoral College vote.
Right, and I guess I didn't see all the fuss right from the beginning with some of the Democratic electors or even Jill Stein, even Hillary Clinton's camp, although never Hillary herself per se. I didn't understand all the fuss about the electoral votes because even if these so-called Hamilton electors had defected from Trump and voted for someone else, they wouldn't have gone for Hillary. The election itself would have just gone to the House of Representatives and they would have voted for Trump anyway.
Well, as you know from my past appearances on your show, I wasn't a Trump supporter. However, I believe in the democratic process, and I think it would have undermined our system of democracy had the Electoral College abandoned, you know, the winner and gone to Hillary. It would have been a crisis of unimaginable proportions.
Right, because it truly would have divided our nation, not just an opinion and partisanship, but an actual, probably physical divide here. Jen, give me your opinion on this. And in my opinion, this is almost to the level of a fake news story, the hype that happened about the Electoral College. It was biased, it was unsubstantiated, there was no proof, any indication that these electors were actually going to defect. There was that one guy in the New York Times who said that he wasn't going to vote for Trump. There was a tiny bit of chatter, but mostly it was rumors. It was unsubstantiated, which in my opinion makes it fake news. What was the agenda of the liberals in doing this?
Well, I think we all agree that this election was a shock of shocks. I think, quite frankly, you know, even Donald Trump's camp thought he wasn't going to win. Hillary Clinton's camp was so overconfident. And this was an upset like Truman's upset in the Dewey election, I think, of 1948. So I think the shock value with the fact that Hillary won the popular vote probably motivated and encouraged people to hope for the unimaginable, and that was that in view of her popular vote plurality, that they would have defected and gone to Hillary. I just think it was wishful thinking, and I don't think it, you know, quite frankly, with the hanging Chad controversy of the Bush-Gore election, you know, this brings out the worst in partisanship, and it wasn't going anywhere.
Right. It almost seems like denial, the inability to process reality here. If this really is due to shock, I mean, Jan, to be honest, it makes me grateful that the Democrats aren't in power, because if this is how long it takes them, it's been 6 weeks now, I think to the day actually, 6 weeks since the election, they can't recover from a shock like that. How would they have ever responded to a national crisis?
Well, you know, nobody likes their ox gored, and had the Republicans, you know, lost election, we probably would have seen the same kind of conduct. I mean, look, we saw it during the campaign, and so, you know, this was a very partisan election. Sometimes partisanship brings out the worst in the respective sides, and I don't think it would have been any different had the Republicans lost, and we would have seen the same kind of demonstrations. This is just human nature, democracy. You know, democracies work their way out like this. I mean, in other countries, you have revolutions. Here, you just have shouting matches.
Right, that's because we're a republic, not a democracy. Democracies actually have wars. They don't last. Republics that are set up this way for a reason, so that it is just a shouting match, so it is just feelings, it is just arguments, it's not actual revolutions.
But more importantly, we are a stable republic and a stable democracy, and we're able to express ourselves under the First Amendment and other forms of protests and demonstrations. And so people are quite civil in this country, and what might cause people to go to arms in other countries just cause people to shout at each other in this country. It's just part of our stable democracy.
Right, I guess that is one thing we should be thankful for, as annoying as the shouting gets here. Let me ask you about these faithless electors. So like I said, 2 defected from Trump, 5 were successful in defecting from Clinton, 3 others tried here. In your opinion, is this going to cause the Democratic Party to change their rules about faithless electors, since they're the ones that lost more of them? to change them, to punish them, or even make it against the law in some states to defect away from the candidate that won the electoral votes on election day?
Well, it is against the law in some states, and I don't know
Right.
from what states the people may have defected, but I think in every election there's probably a defector or two, and it was such a minuscule amount of the total, I don't think it's going to have any effect whatsoever on anything.
Right, I guess I just think it's a little bit ironic because the Democrats were the ones calling for the Hamilton electors to defect, and then they were the ones that actually lost electoral votes through the exact same medium that they were trying to get to happen to the Republicans.
Well, listen, it's 2-1, in a sense. The Democrats stole the election from Richard Nixon in 1960, and there is a thought that the Republicans stole the election from Al Gore in whatever year that was, 1992, whatever year it was. And then there's also the thought that Hillary was unjustly deprived of the presidency in view of her having won the popular vote. And then whatever factor, the Comey factor and the Putin
Right.
factor was on the election. So, I think it's 2-1.
Right, and you know what I always say, if you criticize the rules before you go into a competition, that's one thing, that's fair. You can change the rules, set up the standards, what have you, that's fine. If you whine about the rules after, that's the surest sign that you're a sore loser, that the rules didn't work out for you. Jan, before we go, though, I do want to ask you about one other thing. This was a comment Michelle Obama made to Oprah. She was interviewed. She's doing her own legacy tour, and she was interviewed by Oprah. She said, after this election, this is what it feels like to feel without hope. Jan, I was pretty troubled by that comment. That's a pretty serious statement. What did you make of that?
Well, I, quite frankly, adore Michelle Obama. And, everybody has a bad moment, maybe of intemperate comments, and she could have been a little more artful. Doesn't make her a bad person. She's still a wonderful person.
No,
but,
she's a very classy first lady, I agree.
Right.
But I think after 8 years of her husband's stewardship over the country, if she's at the point that she's feeling no hope, Donald Trump hasn't even been inaugurated as president yet. There's no way that she could be feeling no hope for the future based off of just that election. It would have to be a result of her husband's policies.
Yeah, this is a pretty unique case. Donald Trump was pretty hard on President Obama during the election. He said some really nasty things, such as he's the worst president in the history of the Republic. And so it brought out the worst in him. If this is worst, the worst in her. It wasn't the world's, inartful statement, but she could have done a little better. So
Right, it maybe wasn't a line that was written for her by one of her speechwriters.
Right.
Maybe it was a little bit of an ad lib. But just to clarify here, as a Democrat, we talked about this earlier in the week, as a Democrat who did not vote for Trump, who's still nervous about what Trump's going to do, you don't feel at the point that you feel no hope.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. There's another election coming up in 4 years. But listen, I'm willing to give the man, I said last week, he's a very smart man. And he has an opportunity to be a really great president. And if he listens to forces of moderation and he listens to wise people that are guiding through the process, he can shock everybody. And I'm open to the possibility that he may turn out to be a wonderful president.
Well, I certainly hope you're right. And on that note, I think that's a good time to end the segment. Well, Jan, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Sure, bye.